The single biggest thing you can do is keep average residential rates as low as you can, consistent with environmental goals. Because when you do what California did and you triple your average residential rates, there's just too many people to help and your options are severely limited.
I'm Carolyn Parrs, communicator, coach, and host of Just Power, a podcast about creating a clean energy future without leaving anyone behind. Join me as we explore the technologies, policies, and human stories that can make clean energy not just sustainable for our planet, but accessible for everyone. There is a room that most people never think about. No cameras, no headlines, no viral moments. But the decisions that are made inside of that room will determine how we manage the most expensive grid transformation of our time. And that room belongs to your state's Public Utilities Commission. Hi, I'm Carolyn Parrs, and welcome to our series on leading through energy affordability on Just Power. My guest today is a person that sits in that room. Eric Blank is the chair of the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, and he helps shape how billion-dollar investments get structured, who pays for them, and on what terms. So today we're going to talk about what it takes to make those decisions when investment pressure is accelerating, when low and even moderate income folks are feeling stretched, and also when the path forward is not clear, right? So welcome, Eric.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for showing up. Okay, so we'll jump right in. Now, across the country, other regulators are all confronting this, right? We're all together. And a new wave of investment, grid modernization, electrification, and the growing demand of, we're seeing the data centers, right? In your conversation with other regulators, what feels fundamentally different about the affordability challenges of this moment?
Well, great question. Let me just quickly introduce myself again. Eric Blank. I'm a lawyer and economist. I was appointed by Governor Polis in January 2021 to the Colorado PUC as chair. I was reappointed in January 2025 to another 4-year term. Before that, I spent almost 20 years running a pioneering national renewable energy company that I co-owned and co-founded. At one point, we had developed the largest operating solar facilities in the Midwest, in the eastern United States, Georgia, and Colorado. So I'm going to bring a little bit of a developer.
I love this. Wow. I am so happy you said yes to this interview. Thank you, Eric.
Yes. So I'm going to bring a little bit of a developer,
okay,
a developer background to the regulatory conversation. And I'm going to answer this question by starting out first in Colorado. Over the last 15 years, Colorado has experienced maybe 0.3% growth in retail sales, at least for Excel, Colorado, the largest utility. So 0.3% from 2010 through 2025. We're now seeing forecasts from the utility suggesting that in the low case, growth could be 4%. To a base case that could be 8%. So an increase in sales of anywhere between 10 and 25 times greater than what we've seen over the last 15 years. About 70% of that is large new loads. About 70% of that is data centers. Most of the rest is modest customer growth that's largely offset by efficiency gains and EVs and beneficial electrification of buildings. So significant growth. To meet that growth, we're seeing capital budgets over the next 5 years of roughly 25, somewhere between close to, I'll say over $20 billion over the next 5 years, 2025 to 2029.
Wow. Okay.
To put that into context, when I got on this commission, Total rate base, sort of cumulative capital spending net of depreciation, was maybe 8 billion. Now it's over 12
Right.
billion. So massive increases in capital.
Right.
And I'll just say, if we can get it right, if the growth pays its fair share of the costs it's imposing on the system, it could work out great. If it doesn't, it could be really problematic. So major policy decisions to be made. And I'll just conclude with one final thought from California. In California, over the last, say, 12 to 14 years, average residential rates have tripled. They're now above 45 cents a kilowatt hour.
Yeah.
And this affordability is not some theoretical concern. It's an accomplished fact that we've seen elsewhere, and it's something we're deeply concerned about and trying to manage in ways that we avoid duplicating that experience. So.
Okay. Yeah, which brings me to the next question about your thoughts on how to manage, right? That significant increase in rate base without, having price shocks, I would say, for all the consumers, especially when you're seeing, like you said, the lack of population growth. It's not the population, it's really what's happening with data centers and others. So what would you say to that?
So I think there's some tools we can use. One is trying to link capital spending to actual growth. So in a prior case, we've not committed the full capital spending until we see signed contracts and that the customers are committed to Colorado. So that's one tool we have. Another tool is to try and encourage investments in activities that help put downward pressure on rates. For example, Xcel was one of the leading clean energy utilities promoting a steel for fuel plant where they retired the existing coal plants, could realize fuel, capital, O&M savings, and then replacing it with, at the time, highly cost-effective investments in wind, solar storage, peaking capacity, and transmission. In contrast, other investments, such as wildfire mitigation, that are critical investments to support public policy goals, but don't put downward pressure on rates, we've determined as a state to securitize them. Three ideas. One, link, and I guess the fourth thing is we already discussed a little bit, which is make sure that growth pays its fair share of the costs of serving it. So 4 ideas. One, try and encourage investments that put downward pressure on rates. Make sure growth pays its fair share of the way, link the costs and revenues in real time through binding contracts, and do what you can to make sure the capital is being spent as smartly as possible.
That's a lot. So these are like the leadership solutions. And I've done some research myself on the securitization that was usually used for, let's say, closing a coal plant. And now seeing it, maybe using that tool for another way, right? Maybe helping with the grid, right? We're seeing storms and wildfires. So Colorado is, I'm just going to say, a real leader here. I've seen... Yeah, I've done a lot of research in this area. So Colorado has explored that and is exploring that even more. So really creative financing and tools that we can do so we don't put the pressure on ratepayers, on the folks, right?
That's the goal.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that. So here, regulators have always had a balancing act, right? A reliability, affordability, and that long-term investment you're talking about. So as the scale and speed of this transition increases, how is that balancing act evolving? Like, what are the new tensions that you're experiencing? All regulators, or specifically here in Colorado, to navigate, that wasn't visible even a decade ago.
So we talked about one, which is uncertainty in the load forecast, where we're seeing forecasts that are maybe 10 to 25 times greater than what we experienced
Right.
before. We've also touched a little on extreme weather, where we're seeing wildfire mitigation efforts drive up costs. The Marshall Fire was, as I understood it, didn't have anything out of the ordinary on the wind side, but the dryness and moisture content in the soil was 2 standard deviations beyond anything we'd seen before. Similarly, some of the heat dome events, maybe even right now in Colorado, but certainly in the Pacific Northwest, where Portland, saw 110 degree plus days when the previous high was maybe a little over 100. Again, 1 or 2 standard deviations more than anything we've seen before, and how all those events correlate. If you have wildfires, it can drive down solar production by 40%. So it's all correlated in unpredictable ways. I talk about a few more factors. One is federal policy, partly on tariffs, partly on federal tax policy for clean energy, and on permitting that is evolving in ways that have created a lot of uncertainty, partly because of the tariffs, partly because of the events coming out of the pandemic. We've seen supply chain shocks, which has delayed projects, caused projects to be repriced. So that would be another factor that is sort of changing the way we manage and struggle with the tension between these competing objectives. And finally, I'll mention one last factor that's complicating things, which is the deeper penetration of renewable energy. Historically, Colorado could figure out what the hottest summer day was, figure out how many people were here, figure out what peak demand was, add a planning reserve margin to meet with that, hottest summer day hour, and then that told us how much capacity we need. Now, the hottest summer day is not necessarily the most riskiest day or the day where we're, what we call the highest loss of load probability. That day is peak demand minus wind and solar. So the hottest summer day, if there's a lot of wind and a lot of solar, may be fine. But what we're seeing in California and Texas is that the riskiest days are, and the riskiest time of days. So typically Colorado's peak demand has been 5. Now we're seeing our highest loss of load probability hour moving between 7 to 10 p.m. because it's after the sun sets and the solar doesn't generate. And there's batteries, so the state of charge of the batteries matter. In California, they've had the most problems in August and September when the solar, the sun's lower on the horizon, the solar goes down earlier. So it's not only is it a shift in the time of day and the season, but it's also a shift in from a deterministic approach to determining your highest loss of load probability, hottest summer day, to a much more probabilistic framework where you got to figure out the probability of the wind, the probability of the solar, the state of charge of the batteries. And, as units age, we're seeing, typically utilities have assigned 100% capacity value to thermal units, but we're now seeing major resource adequacy problems caused by extended outages at thermal plants. So it's just a much more complicated planning
So
environment
complex.
for all those reasons. Demand uncertainty, federal policy, deeper penetration of renewables, supply chain issues, and extreme weather. So
This is a
a
new
lot,
normal, right? But this is where we're at. It's not like what will go back to where it was before,
no,
right?
I don't
Right?
think
Like
so.
we had 87 degrees, 85 to 87 degrees in Boulder, Colorado in March, right?
Yeah, it's
When has
40
that happened
degrees,
before?
40 degrees, 35 to 40 degrees above the highest temperature ever experienced in March since 1895.
Wow. Wow. Your job just got a little bit more complicated, is what I'm seeing, right? And anticipating what's to come. A couple of shows back, we had Microsoft on, and they talked about Hannah Green talked about the digitalization of everything coming down the pike. Maybe that might help us a little bit more. I don't know on forecasting. So, but how do you forecast what's so unpredictable, right? So,
It's scenario. It's a shift from deterministic to probabilistic, and
yeah.
looking at fairly wide scenarios. A few years ago, we looked at what would the world look like if Denver got up to 110 degrees.
Okay.
So and that was right after Storm Uri, where Denver got down to whatever it was, minus 15 for three
Okay.
days.
Oh no.
So we're
Juxtapose there.
we're trying to look at alternative scenarios and do a robust analysis.
Okay. Bravo. All right. I just want to talk a little bit about the large loads, right? Right. Everyone's talking about what's happening with, I guess, data centers and AI. And so, how does the commission stand on cost allocation for this transformational load growth? Where are you
So,
at?
so we have a filing coming up in the next 10 days or 2 weeks. So I can't prejudge that, or
Okay.
I'm limited what I can say about Colorado, other than to say, we seek to, it's not exactly the legal standard, but the goal is to have these customers pay their fair share of the costs they impose on the system. What that means in practice is going to be litigated in front of us. We're going to have to hear from the company. We'll have to hear from the parties. And like everything else we do, we will make a decision based on evidence in that record, based on what we hear from the parties
Yeah.
and what the evidence says. So it's a little like a court in some ways. You hear from the witnesses, there's cross-examination, and I think a lot of our legitimacy comes out of grounding the decisions in those records. So
Okay. This is yet another a new path that's being taken right now because this hasn't happened in the past, right? So all of this is, I mean, it's happened, I guess, in Virginia a lot,
yeah,
right? Back in the, 2018. But this is like new, it's happening across America now, right? Because of AI. So,
yeah, I'd say Colorado may be a little bit behind it. I think there's 35 states with exemptions, manufacturing
okay.
exemptions to sales and use tax, which is a big deal for these types of customers. Colorado is one of maybe 15 or 20 states that doesn't have it. So in terms of the
Hmm.
largest loads, the 1,000 megawatt loads, we may be maybe a little behind, but there's still plenty of customers interested in Colorado. And we'll see what the parties and the
All
company
right, so we're going to be watching this, all right, in Colorado. I'm sure other states are watching you too. So more on that to come. I just want to do a secondary question back to rates. Like a number of states are exploring putting constraints on earnings, right? ROE from their utilities. Do you think that's an effect, or does Colorado think it's an effective way to that part of it to deal with rising electricity costs?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have two rate cases in front of us. Well, two with Excel, one with Atmos. Again, I'm limited by what I can say, and would just repeat a little bit what I said before: is view the PUC as an umpire calling balls and strikes, and really trying to decide things based on evidence in the record. So we're not going into these cases trying to mandate a limit
Right.
on this or that. We're seeing what the record says and trying to come out with a fair, reasonable, balanced outcome grounded in the record of that cases. And like you say, there's various tools you can do this or that to try and help out customers. But at the same time, Colorado needs substantial new capital investment for all the reasons we've discussed. And
Right.
the utilities have a legal right to earn a legal right to earn to have an opportunity to earn a fair return. A lot of as we talk about all these uncertainties, risks got to be allocated fairly. So it's a return on an opportunity to earn a fair return on a risk adjusted basis. So I think that's all I can say is,
Okay.
we're trying to be an umpire calling balls and strikes.
Okay. Fair enough. So one of the central questions of this series, right, is what does credible responses from leaders look like when it comes to energy affordability right now? We all know the different problems, what's happening, right? We've stated that over and over again. But from your perspective, what does the response look like in practice across utilities, policymakers, right, commissioners? You've already said a few things that are really groundbreaking because they're not things that are happening in this state that they're not elsewhere. But I'm going to pose it again because that's the main question of this series. What does that response look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really data-driven, smart decision making. It's a lot's what we talked about, shifting from deterministic to probabilistic analysis.
Okay.
It's how you move forward under really unprecedented, at least in the last 15 years, uncertainty. It's moving quickly when the world changes. The federal government restricted the length of time to get the tax credits, and we approved several thousand megawatts of new resources in 6 months, which is multi-billion-dollar acquisition from the time we approved the resource acquisition to the time we finalized the specific projects approved. And most of the credit goes to the utility and the parties and the governor's office who led it forward, and we're prepared to move that quickly. So speed to market is critical. Just making sure the economics work of the business, new customers pay their fair share of the costs.
Okay. See how that gets played out, right? I've heard a lot of case studies on that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But the key piece of it is data-driven decision making based on the economics, the technology, and the underlying causes of the impacts on the system. When you try and manage too much, and you have to manage to the politics, but that to me is the core for maintaining affordability.
Okay. So data, right? Policy, right? But underneath all of that are the people, right? All of us. So ultimately, you're making decisions that affect families, whether they can keep the lights on or not, right? Or, whether they're stressed out about their bill when it shows up in their mailbox. So what has sitting in the seat that you sit in, right, taught you about what people actually need from the institutions that carry the public trust, such as the commission?
So in Colorado, we probably have something like close to 400,000 income qualified customers under federal definitions for allocating bill assistance. Under state definitions, we probably have another 200,000 that live in disproportionately impacted communities. Um, Maybe for the regulated utilities, we have 1.5 million customers. So somewhere between 40 and 50% of the customers uh, are struggling under either federal or state
Yeah.
definitions of, and it's probably even higher if you start talking about energy burden as a percentage of total income. So there's the amount of people at risk greatly exceeds the likely resources available to
Mm.
provide assistance. I think the single biggest thing you can do is keep average residential rates as low as you can, consistent with all these other factors,
Yeah.
resource adequacy, wildfire management, everything, environmental goals. Because when you do what California did and you triple your average residential rates, there's just too many people to help, and your options are severely limited.
Hmm.
So uh, it's a sustained focus on rates, lots of measures, wallet share,
Okay.
energy burden, but all that has to be managed over time. And a lot of these utility investments are amortized over very long periods. So, um, and a lot of the programs are opt-in. So you just worry that they're, you know, helping the people who are most sophisticated and maybe need help the least.
And many of
So,
them don't, aren't in the system, right? Because
right,
of all the constraints of the system. So there's, the numbers you said are probably even higher, right? At this point.
maybe,
So,
yeah,
so here's the thing, though. There's only so much that at the commission you can do because many of this is outside of your jurisdiction, right? Federal policy, for instance, or market forces that are happening, legislation gaps. How do you how do you balance that? How do you lead when some of the biggest levers aren't yours to pull?
I mean, you just do what you can. We have a lot of authority, both under constitutional and state law. When you see problems, you just do your best to articulate them. And whether it's the governor's office or the utilities, there's other people or the legislature. There's other people who can pull on those levers. You just do the best you can and try and be honest and lead where you can, and hopefully it makes things better than it otherwise would be.
Yeah. Um, what we talk a lot about communities and connection and hearing from our communities, just people that might want to interact with the commission. Many don't even know that they can. What would you say would be the best way to do that? That would actually, say, move the needle or have some impact?
Yeah, so I'd say that's one of the things that pleasantly surprised me about this job was a lot of our cases, sort of the coal plant retirements. We went to Craig and Hayden and Brush and Pueblo multiple times, and just hear from people, telling their stories, and I mean stories, narratives,
Yeah.
just compelling personal descriptions of what's going on in their lives. Similarly, every major rate case, we we just hear from normal people. I
Mm.
remember being in Pueblo, and one of the security guards who was there came up and talked about working 4 jobs and trying to help his parents and his family. People who've lost their spouse or kids that are sick.
Mm.
So the public process and the comments just make this incredibly real.
Ah, so they do affect you.
Oh, totally, totally. It's. I mean, mean, there's legal standards, how you rely on them to make decisions, but it's impossible not to be influenced by how these decisions affect ordinary people. And, we're subject to very strict legal standards, how evidence, what we rely on to make those decisions. I've just enjoyed that communication and that ability to hear from, people who are, care enough to come out, at 7 p.m. On a weekday, on a workday
School
evening.
night, right? The kids are,
Yeah, sometimes they're with their kids.
the
Sometimes it is the kids speaking.
kids show up. Okay. Well, I'm really happy to hear that, Eric. It's the human side to this whole energy transition that is just as important to me as the data and the technology. So that's really...
Right, it's like you retire an aging, expensive coal plant, and it saves statistical lives. But there's also the person who comes and testifies and talks about their asthma living by.
Yeah.
So, but you got to keep the lights on. Everything's a trade-off.
Oh, it is. So as we close, and all that you're going through, all that you've seen the changes, all that you're navigating, and as this transition accelerates, what would you say to the next person that sits in your chair?
So I guess for me, this is my retirement. And I'm doing this because my life's better doing it than not doing it.
That.
So I talk about the opportunity to really make things, make positive change. I'd also talk about how long it takes to come up to speed. I've been in this job over 5 years and really didn't get comfortable to year 2 or 3. One of my colleagues, Commissioner Gilman, has been in the job 6 years. So it's... that was one thing that surprised me about how long it took to get comfortable with the process, the parties, the substance, the history.
Right. The complexity of it all. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that, right, it's going to take a couple of years to get up to speed. A lot of things are changing, as you said on the show. And ultimately, you're doing it to make people's lives better, right? And you're leaving a legacy.
That's what's motivating me.
Okay. Thank you so much, Eric, for being part of our Leading Through Energy Affordability series. Eric didn't have to sit down for this conversation with me, especially with what's going on right now in Colorado. So it says something. It says something big that he did. And what's at stake now. And what it looks like when leaders really show up. If you want to see more of that, make sure you subscribe to Just Power so you don't miss any part of this series of leaders who are showing up in this pivotal time. Because the energy transition isn't happening to us, it's happening with us. So thank you for showing up today. Because we're all in this together, right, Eric?
Absolutely. Pleasure talking to you. Thanks for the opportunity. And do I sign off now or?
We're signing off. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe to Just Power wherever you get your podcasts. And if you really loved it, leave us a review and tell everyone you know about our podcast. It's going to take all of us to create a clean energy future that leaves no one behind.